Hello, friends. Have you ever heard of a woman letting a man know that she wants him to marry her by uncovering his feet while he's sleeping and then laying down beside them? It's definitely one of the stranger stories in the Bible, and it's just part of the extraordinary story of Ruth, this time on You, Me, and the Word. Once upon a time, in the land of Israel, during the time of the judges, there was a time of a great famine. In Bethlehem, there lived a woman named Naomi, her husband Elimelech, and their two sons. Faced with a desperate situation, they made a daring decision to leave their homeland of Bethlehem and seek refuge in the foreign land of Moab. In Moab, their lives took an unexpected twist. Naomi's husband passed away, leaving her a widow, but she still had her sons to depend on, and they married Moabite women named Orpah and Ruth. For 10 years, the three women shared their joys and sorrows, forming a strong bond. Now, this isn't in the text, but it is. From what you hear next, you'll know that it must be true. However, tragedy struck once more, and both of Naomi's sons died, leaving her bereaved and without any male heirs. She was grief-stricken and hopeless, and at that time, a widow depended on her sons. Hearing the news that the famine had lifted in Bethlehem, now 10 years later or more, Naomi resolved to go home. She urged her daughters-in-law to go back to their families to seek new lives, for she believed she had nothing more to offer them. Upon hearing of her plans, Orpah and Ruth insisted on accompanying Naomi, refusing to abandon her in her time of need. But Naomi, consumed by her own sorrow, urged them to return to their families in Moab and find new husbands and have new lives. Orpah tearfully bid farewell and returned, but Ruth stood her ground, uttering words that would echo throughout history. "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Sometimes you may have heard that at a wedding, but of course you now know where this comes from, and it's a very different circumstance. Now, with hearts full of determination, Naomi and Ruth embarked on their journey to Bethlehem. As they arrived, news of their return spread like wildfire. The townspeople were amazed and whispered excitedly, for Naomi had once been a woman of great standing. However, now she returned as a broken woman, a shadow of her former self. But undeterred by their circumstances, Ruth decided to take matters into her own hands, or so she thought. She stepped into the fields to gather the leftover grains, as was customary and actually part of God's law to provide for the poor and needy. It just so happened that the fields she stumbled upon belonged to a wealthy and respected man named Boaz, a relative of Naomi's deceased husband. Boaz, an honorable man, noticed Ruth's unwavering dedication and her devotion to Naomi. Impressed by her character and her beauty, he approached Ruth and offered her protection, instructing his workers to leave extra grain for her to collect. She was still gleaning in the fields, but she was given a little extra. And Ruth was astonished and grateful for this unexpected favor. And as the days turned into weeks, Ruth continued to glean in Boaz's fields while Naomi devised a plan. She was aware of Boaz's noble character and his role as a potential kinsman redeemer. A kinsman or guardian redeemer was the legal term for someone who had the legal obligation to help a close relative out of serious difficulty, including taking in the family of a deceased man. This is also part of the law referenced in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 25 to 55. Now, in light of all of this, Naomi encouraged Ruth to approach Boaz during the harvest celebration, where he would be sleeping near the threshing floor. Cloaked in courage, Ruth crept silently towards Boaz, uncovering his feet and lying down there. Startled by his presence, but Boaz woke up and Ruth made her plea. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. This symbolic gesture was an appeal for Boaz to take her as his wife and fulfill the duty of a kinsman redeemer, which would provide security and protection for Ruth and Naomi. Boaz, deeply moved by Ruth's loyalty and integrity, agreed to her request. However, he informed her that there was another relative with a closer claim to redemption, and he would need to address this matter before taking any further steps. Now, redeemer is an important word in the Bible. It could be as simple as someone with a debt or an obligation who could be redeemed by another who takes care of the debt. A debt is owed, someone else pays it. In a way, that's what's happening here. A slave could be redeemed by someone paying for the cost of release. God redeemed Israel out of slavery in Egypt. Through Jesus Christ, God redeems us from the penalty and the consequence of sin, the control that sin, bad, immoral, hurtful things we do, the control that sin has over our lives. That sin, those ways which we miss the mark, separate us from God. But through the forgiveness we obtain through Jesus, God redeems us, pays that debt on our behalf. To extend the connection with the kinsman redeemer, God welcomes us into God's household, God's family. Bottom line, you will hear redeemer language throughout the Bible. It's all connected. The story of the Bible is how God redeems this broken world. The story of Ruth is a close-up view of this working in one family. And to continue on with our story of Ruth, the next day, Boaz summoned the relative who had a closer connection and presented him with the opportunity to redeem Naomi's land and marry Ruth. But when he learned that this duty also involved preserving the name and legacy of the deceased, he hesitated, not because he was terrible, but he realized the implications for his own inheritance and his own family. Therefore, he willingly relinquished his right to redemption, clearing the way for Boaz to fulfill this role. With great delight, Boaz wed Ruth, and they became husband and wife in the presence of the village witnesses. Ruth and Boaz had a child, a son, whom they named Obed. Now, Obed would grow to become the father of Jesse, and Jesse, in turn, would be the father of the mighty King David. If you don't know about David, you will hear more about him soon in a future video. But the original hearers of this story would know all about David and his father Jesse. The story of Ruth is a tale of faith, loyalty, and redemption. It reminds us that even in the midst of tragedy, God can weave together a beautiful tapestry of love and restoration. It was true for Ruth and Naomi, and it can be true for you too. Ruth's unwavering commitment to her mother-in-law and her willingness to step out in faith led to blessings that transcended generations, ultimately playing a part in the lineage of Jesus Christ himself. Want to see more? Be sure to like this video and hit the subscribe button as we continue with the story of the Bible. Need to catch up with the story so far? There's a playlist in the description below. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. See you again soon.